Me Matt here. So WrestleMania 15, or WrestleMania XV as it was advertised. You know, back in the day, I started getting into wrestling more. Well, it was basically more around the time of WrestleMania 14, and yeah, I think that this was an interesting one. A lot of people will say that WrestleMania 15, well, 1999 in general was a shit year, but I tend to disagree. I know that there are way too many title changes, but I think that's what kind of makes it interesting. You know, starting with The Rock and stuff like that, you have a lot of interesting shots in that sense. So, yeah, I think we started with 1998's Deadly Games. You had The Rock be kicked out of Nation of Domination. You had him be a good guy during the whole Survivor Series. He won the tournament, but without with the price of joining the corporation, or what would be the corporation. And so he would become known as the corporate champion instead of the people's champion. And it was interesting. So that would mean that you have Stone Cold Steve Austin, who would eventually win the Rumble. Or, no, actually it was McMahon who won the Rumble. And then you would have Vince McMahon versus Steve Austin with the help of the debuting of Paul White and Valentine's Day Massacre. Hence having this match, which will be the main event for WrestleMania 15, Steve Austin versus The Rock. But let's go ahead and let's watch, or let's talk about, rather, WrestleMania 15. Anyhow, we get the dark match, which was Jacqueline with Terri Runnels defeating Ivory. And not sure when they did Sunday Night Heat. Back in the day, it was usually, instead of having a pre-show, no less, it was, let's have some matches on Sunday Night Heat before the pay-per-view, and that way people who don't buy the pay-per-view can just see some matches on a different stage. So I wonder if that was it. Anyways, you know, Jacqueline won. Jacqueline, of course, being in the WWE Hall of Fame of last year. And very cool. And so then we had another dark match. D'Lo Brown and Test won when Droz and The Godfather eliminated each other. This was a battle royal for the Tag Team Championship. And this was pretty cool. Of course, there was that incident with Droz and D'Lo Brown where Droz ended up being paralyzed for the rest of his life. I think he forgave D'Lo Brown eventually, and they talked about it. You know, D'Lo Brown obviously still holds himself responsible for what happened, and but it was an accident nonetheless. D'Lo Brown and Test, I don't remember that tag team. Interesting. Then we go to WrestleMania 15, and it's for the WWF Hardcore Championship. Now, the Hardcore Championship was debuted at Survivor Series Deadly Games. Well, actually, it was debuted when McMahon surprised his new son, Mankind, McFoley, with the WWF Hardcore Championship. A little nod to ECW in a way, being more of, we're going to have hardcore matches just for that title. So, Falls Count Anywhere shit. It was cool. I really enjoyed that title. And I thought years ago it was the reincarnation of the WWF Eagle Skull belt, but I guess it wasn't. And then it's too bad that it got retired, but I could see why. I mean, he wants to keep going with the match of having Falls Count Anywhere, 24/7 matches where anybody can win at one night. And that was Hardcore Holly, Billy Gunn, who was the Hardcore Champion, and Al Snow. And Hardcore Holly ended up defeating Billy Gunn and Al Snow. This isn't when Bob Holly became Hardcore Holly, but it was so that Hardcore Holly was the champion at one time. And oh wait, was it? I can't remember now. I think this is where he became Hardcore Holly, but whatever. He won the match, becoming the new Hardcore Champion. And then we get Owen Hart and Jeff Jarrett with Debra, who defeated D'Lo Brown and Test with Ivory to retain their WWF Tag Team Championship. This is pretty much a bittersweet match. This will be, unfortunately, the last time that Owen Hart is gonna be at WrestleMania. And, this is the last year of his life. And I've said it before, it's a damn shame, that it ended that quick. I remember that day, and it was a terrible day, and seeing these wrestling fans in high school who had their black armbands and Owen Hart on their knuckles. I didn't quite understand, and being a huge wrestling fan that I was, I mean, yeah, I came back to it eventually, the following year, but not understanding, because I wasn't a fan of Owen Hart at the time. I feel ashamed of myself in that sense. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're a fan or not. You still show respect for the person that died. And Owen Hart was probably the most genuine, kind-hearted human beings there were. And again, a damn shame that he's no longer with us because of one stupid mistake. But his last days were with Jeff Jarrett, who apparently isn't very well liked. But whatever. This was a fairly good match. Not really a memorable tag team, but it was a good match. Then we get the Brawl for All match. Butterbean, who's a boxer. I know that he did that wrestling celebrity show with Hulk Hogan and Eric Bischoff. I think Eric Bischoff was on there, but anyways, he took on Bart Gunn. Yeah, that's probably one of the few times that Bart Gunn was ever mentioned in WWF. I do recall watching my wrestling DVD for the Hardcore Championship and actually seeing Bart Gunn go after the Hardcore Championship from trying to get it from Bob Holly. Then we have Mankind versus Big Show to have these guys, whoever wins gets to be the special guest referee for the main event, Rock and Austin. Now, I mentioned earlier that Paul White, aka The Big Show, came in and originally wanted to help McMahon win the match at Valentine's Day Massacre. and unfortunately that never happened. You know, they had him take Austin and throw him through the cage, and then that basically backfired. Big Show eventually still was a part of the corporation. You know, it's funny too. You see this guy, probably one of the only wrestlers besides Booker T, who came into the WWF from WCW. He was a big WCW star in his own right, and he still wrestles today. Booker T may not wrestle now and maybe on commentating and stuff like that, but the Big Show, Paul White, is still wrestling. Now, it kind of sucks how they push him around, face, heel, and what have you, but it doesn't seem to bother him in the slightest. I think he's had his bad years behind him, but yeah, he's still active. He lost a shit ton of weight. Like, he loses weight every year, I guess, because of the way how tall he is. But the fact that he's went to the gym and has really chiseled out, really looked much better than he has, I guess. And then we have, oh yeah, so Mankind won the match by disqualification. So now he's going on to the main event that night. Then we have the Intercontinental Championship match. Road Dogg, Ken Shamrock, Goldust, with Blue Meanie and Ryan Shamrock, and Venis. I'm living in the hometown of Venis. I actually thought Venis was from Toronto. Apparently he's not. I mean, he's living in Las Vegas in the States now, and has been there for years, but yeah, this is kind of interesting to see that he actually lives in Peterborough. Road Dogg defended the belt, retaining the Intercontinental Championship, and that was a pretty good match. I think having Road Dogg have the singles title was pretty cool. I think there was a lot of interesting matches he's had in there, and it's always interesting to see which tag team member gets a singles push. And with the New Age Outlaws, it was both of them. I mean, I think that Billy Gunn was the hardcore champion. Road Dogg Jesse James as the Intercontinental champion. So anyways, then we get Kane versus Triple H. You know, there's a storyline that keeps repeating in the WWE, well, mostly just WWF, and that is the love triangle. Macho Man and George Animal Steel, Macho Man and Hulk Hogan, Triple H and Kane, and Triple H and Kurt Angle. You throw in Stephanie McMahon or Miss Elizabeth into the mix. So, let's see. Okay. So, Triple H and Chyna formed a union. So we thought. And this was a bit of a twist. First, it ended in disqualification. I'm not quite sure exactly what happened. Triple H and Chyna reunited and celebrated in the ring, and you thought everything was cool, but you'll find out in a minute that it's all false. So, yeah, that was an interesting thing. We have Sable versus Tori for the Women's Championship. Of course, Sable won. And, yeah, Tori wasn't that famous. Like, she managed X-Pac and someone else for that matter, but Sable was one of the one of the best divas back then, although I wasn't necessarily a fan of hers. But she won this match. And, she broke her way from her real life ex husband, Mark Marrow, and became, her own character. So I thought that was pretty cool. Then we get the match European Championship, which is another title I miss. Shane McMahon, the European Champion, with Test versus X-Pac. Now, what was actually fascinating about this was the interview with the so-called reunited T-Generation X, X-Pac, Triple H, and the New Age Outlaws with Chyna. And that was a pretty good promo, I think that it was interesting to me because you thought it was going to be cool. I mean, back then last year, WrestleMania 14, you had Shawn Michaels get injured. So Triple H took the ball and rolled with it, so to speak. So DX became from being a heel tag team, or a heel stable, if you will, to a face stable. And it was really cool to see that. So in this case, you think, okay, they're back together. It's going to be an awesome night. Boy, was I fucking surprised. So, it was a fairly good match. Obviously, Shane McMahon has a very energetic personality. He's fearless and all that stuff. And, you think that they're down for the count. You think everything is good. And Triple H comes out. And you think, oh, he's going to save X-Pac. And he's going to help X-Pac win the championship. And, oh boy. Talk about a big surprise, like I said just now. Triple H pedigrees X-Pac and joins the corporation. I was watching, I believe it was Raw, and this was after WrestleMania 15. And there was an attack. I can't remember who it was, but it was the corporation that attacked them. And a familiar face I saw coming out to help the corporation was Triple H. And I thought, what? But I saw WrestleMania 15 shortly after that. And yeah, that begins the whole Triple H being the heel, being the so-called leader in a way. This guy who was the rebel, was the guy who said, I got 2 words for you, suck it. And DX fell apart for a while, and then came back in, I believe, early 2000. But it didn't last very long. And then, of course, you get the reincarnation in 2006 with Shawn Michaels and Triple H, the reformed, more cleaner version of DX. And although I marked out for that, it was still icky in a way. So that was a big surprise. Then we get a Hell in a Cell match. The first Hell in a Cell match in WrestleMania. You got Hell in a Cell in 97 and Bad Blood. You of course get the infamous Hell in a Cell in 98 King of the Ring with Mick Foley getting his ass handed to him and almost costing him his career. Maybe his life. And then you get this. What was interesting about this one was Undertaker's persona being that of more gothic, just being more gothic, having the APA, or the Acolytes, as they were called back then, Midian. You had the Brood, which existed of Gangrel, Edge and Christian. This was a pretty cool gothic stable, if you will. This was the best stable there was back then, and it disbanded eventually. Oh yeah, I forgot Vestra as well. But this was pretty cool. In this match, you have the steel cage, the Hell in a Cell. You have a great match, and then you have what some may call controversy with Undertaker taking a rope and hanging the Big Boss Man after the match. How weird and disturbing are some people in that sense. And some of us thought that the Boss Man was dead at that point, because who could survive that? It was obviously just for show, but yes, this was also an interesting turn of events that WWE has never showed before. Yeah, very interesting. Then we get the main event. The WWF Champion, The Rock, the Texas Rattlesnake, Stone Cold Steve Austin. Now, I said this in the beginning of the video. In 1999, a lot of people are going to say that show sucked in that day, in that year. I really enjoyed it. It was the best part of the ninth grade I could think of. It was people who were wrestling fans who are either Stone Cold Steve Austin fans or The Rock fans. And I was in the minority. I was a Stone Cold Steve Austin fan. Or there were a lot of Rock fans. There weren't too many Stone Cold Steve Austin fans. So I would have many debates. A lot of people enjoyed how The Rock had charisma. To me, this was a good match. And yet, it was also no disqualification. Which was made by Vince McMahon. When I look at that year, I look at how it all started with Vince McMahon winning the Royal Rumble. And then, of course, I said the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. But you have a great match in itself. You have a good story build. You have before WrestleMania, where Steve Austin had the beer truck, and had the corporation in the ring. You had Steve Austin pour beer on the corporation. You have Vince McMahon on the floor swimming in the beer. You had that classic promo that Steve Austin cut. And yes, you had a great feud between these two. And it didn't just start with WrestleMania 15. You had 97, The Rock, and Stone Cold Steve Austin feuding for the Intercontinental Championship. You had Royal Rumble 98, where The Rock and Steve Austin were the last two in the ring. You had afterwards, you had Steve Austin and The Rock at Backlash, and many others. And in the future, WrestleMania 17, WrestleMania 19, Survivor Series 2001. And I'll get to the other two WrestleManias eventually. But this feud, the reason why it worked so well was because those two had great chemistry for its time being. This was like Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels. This was, in some ways, like Randy Savage and Ric Flair. Those two worked well, and it was a good match. And then eventually, Stone Cold Steve Austin becoming two-time WWF champion. Yes, this was probably argued, and it probably will be argued, that I said earlier in my review of WrestleManias that Hulk Hogan weaseled his way into the main event at WrestleMania after WrestleMania after WrestleMania. And yes, Stone Cold Steve Austin main evented 3 WrestleManias. But here's the thing. It was always for the WWF title. I look at Hulk Hogan, and yes, he faced Andre the Giant for the WWF title. He faced Randy Savage for the WWF title. He faced Sergeant Slaughter for the WWF title. But here's the thing. He faced King Kong Bundy. But here's the thing. WrestleMania 9, the worst ending to a WrestleMania that I could think of. He wasn't involved in the match with Yokozuna and Bret Hart, but yet he became WWF champion. His match a year earlier, WrestleMania 8, it was with Sid Justice, and it wasn't for the WWF champion. It wasn't for the championship. It was because he was leaving. Steve Austin main evented 3 WrestleManias. And it was all for the WWF Championship. It wasn't because he decided to put himself in the main event. It was because he won the Royal Rumble. He earned the WWF Championship. Now, you could have had The Rock and Austin at WrestleMania 19, but I'll get to that. Main event WrestleMania 19. It never happened. But again, I will get to WrestleMania 19. That's another WrestleMania that I could live without. But WrestleMania 15, it defines my school life in high school. It defines everything that was awesome back then. Maybe not for everybody else, but it was for me. And that's good enough. Talk to you later. Bye.